So here's the deal. Are we getting our money's worth? That is the question. What have you found? And with the new government and all the stuff happening, where are we sitting with that? How about you folks that maybe are a little bit older? What's happened to your budget as far as drugs is concerned? And it is a profit-driven industry, as we saw in the ABC special. Let's take a look at that.
This is a profit-driven industry that's interested in making money. And I think the profitability of the pharmaceutical industry is key to that industry continuing to produce the innovative compounds that are having such a clear impact on public health.
Well, there you go, profit-driven industry. Well, we have a gentleman in the studio with me tonight. I've heard his program quite a bit on the radio, and I've always wanted to meet him in person. So tonight I have an opportunity to do that, and so do you. His name is Alan Glasser. He's with Mark's Plaza Pharmacy. Now, I've heard that enough that I've actually got the name memorized. And a number of different products that you sometimes don't think would be sold in a drugstore that are actually doing good for a lot of people. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But so good to have you on. We're going to talk about this whole industry and get some insight from a pharmacist tonight. We'll be back to do that. We'll be back to take your calls at 1-866-669-8810.
Vehicle graphics for online provided by AdPrint, the Decal people, skilled to handle all your corporate graphic needs.
Don and I want to invite you and the members of your family to join us for the Vancouver Rally in Vancouver, British Columbia, Friday, June the 14th at Pacific Coliseum. Jesse Duplantis will be joining us, plus the Dove Brothers, the Tally Trio, Marty Raybon, and the John Hagee family. Join us for this great evening of gospel music and anointed preaching, Friday, June the 14th in Vancouver, British Columbia at the Pacific Coliseum. I'll see you there.
It's because you have so many reasons to arrive that we have been inspired to create so many ways of getting you there. General Motors, getting more people to where they need to be than any company in the world.
Graceful curves, flawless tailoring. Premium features like these are standard for Sklar Pepler. Their unique thematic showroom makes shopping effortless. As you walk through, you'll see design ideas for the cosmopolitan condo, the cozy suburban home, and the rustic mountain chalet. Custom taste? The Design Center features 100 frames and more than 2,000 designer-quality fabrics. Shop today in Coquitlam to imagine your living room with the quality and design of Sklar Pepler Sofa Shop.
Now TV encourages the expression of a wide variety of views on this program. However, Now TV does not necessarily share or endorse these points of view.
Okay, we're talking about a huge industry here, the drug industry. And we spend a lot of money, as you saw on that graphic that was up on the screen, a huge amount of money each year on drugs, prescription drugs. And, what's the difference between drugs, the brand names and the generic? And are we getting ripped off in some areas? I mean, these are questions we all want to know. It's our hard-earned money, right? When we buy a product, we want to know that not only are we getting the right product, but are we getting the right price? That's a huge thing. So 1-866-NOW-TV10. If you have any questions, you've always said, boy, I'd love to sit down and just talk to a pharmacist for a while and ask a few hard questions. Well, we have the guy to do that for tonight. Alan Glasser's with us. And Alan, this is a big profit type of industry, isn't it?
Yes, especially at the manufacturing level. As you saw on TV in this show, there's huge profits in the manufacturing level. By the time you hit the pharmacist, where our profit comes from is our professional fee that we charge, and we make hardly anything, if at all, on the actual prescription drug.
Now, some people have the feeling like perhaps doctors are hooked into this somehow, that maybe they prescribe a certain drug, and so they go down and they say, okay, well, here is that drug. Is it always a drug that is maybe the best price for them, or are they just the people that get their you know, get their imagination going, and the last word was this company was in to talk to me, so I'll subscribe this. How does that work?
Well, it works by, number one, in medical school, they go through, you know, their training, and they're taught at that time the best options. But it's always a question of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay? Drug companies have sales reps that are out there talking to physicians, leaving with samples in their offices, trying to be top of mind. Okay? Most physicians in the patterns of practice, generally you see 80 or 90% common maladies, you know, antibiotic therapies. Physicians have their favorite kind. For antidepressants, they have their favorite kind, et cetera, et cetera. And when things don't work, well, then they go to some of the newer ones. So most physicians, yes, why do the drug companies spend so much money having sales reps, having talks, having dinners, doing trainings with the physicians?
Yeah, what they say in the States, $5 billion.
That's right.
Just marketing certain drugs to the physicians themselves.
That's right. They're doing the training, although it's supposedly the jobs of the medical school. I don't know what kind of normal, you know, competency. There's no competency exams after you've passed the, you know, your license, but there are, you know, continuing education credits that you can get as a physician or as a pharmacist, or I'm sure as nurses. Every college, you know, has that type of thing. So you have information from the drug companies, and you have a set of information, say, out of the journals. That's where a physician would get his or her extra information.
So if I come to a particular doctor and I say I have this condition, and automatically he knows of a particular drug that has just been marketed to him, saying this is great stuff, it's going to take care of this, he may, instead of going to the book and finding something that would take care of the, you know, be a lot less, he may go ahead and just prescribe that because it's in his mind. It's
top of mind. I mean, mostly you can generally say any of the older drugs that have been on the market for years have already been genericized in Canada. So they're going to cost significantly less, half, a fifth, a quarter, 10% of what the original brand name cost. And depending on the physician, they may want to start with the older drug. That also has the potential for more side effects, not less. That's the goal of all the drug manufacturers, to bring to market a drug that will treat the condition and have fewer side effects.
All right, so let's take something, for example, aspirin. Now that aspirin is actually a registered name, is it not?
Yes, it is.
So if I walk in, I say, I want to buy aspirin from you, and you say, okay, you can buy, and I guess we can say Bayer aspirin.
Right.
And you can say, do you realize that I can sell you a generic brand, same thing, and I'd say, what's the difference? You're going to say
$5.
$5. It's the same thing.
It is.
Why wouldn't I do that? Why don't people do that?
Well, number one, Bayer spends still millions of dollars a year trying to convince you that their aspirin from their manufacturing plant is better than anybody else's. But
a chemical is a chemical.
It is. It's you know, and there's probably very few companies in the world that actually produce ASA, acetylsalicylic acid, that, you know, Bayer puts in their tablet, and you know, whatever brand you get, any generic brand puts in their tablet, and it works just the same. There's extremely few incidences in my clinical experience that I've seen any difference between the Bayer aspirin brand and a generic.
So we're kind of brainwashed by marketing, like we are in so many other things, just to believe that because something is a household name, it must be better.
Not necessarily so. I mean, if they come into the drugstore, I'm sure any pharmacist would tell them, well, you got Bayer, and if you want to buy that, you're welcome to buy that brand name, or you can buy a generic, and there's now a choice in Canada. Same as there's a choice in Canada about certain prescription drugs. You can buy the brand name, still available, or you can buy a generic, which by law has to be equally effective to the brand name to be in order to call it generic.
How much, on a percentage-wise, would you say most pharmacists sell generic compared to brand?
I would say it's 90%. 90% generic when there's a choice, and unless there's a patient, depends on the area, unless the patient has a particular desire for the brand name, I would say 90% of the time the patient would pick a generic drug, or the pharmacist would only have a generic on the shelf because of people making a choice with their pocketbook.
Okay, we've got a ton of calls here, but let me ask you one other question. If the doctor prescribes a certain drug,
Yes.
You know there's a generic brand of that as a pharmacist, much cheaper. You have to give them the drug that the doctor prescribed.
Only if he said no substitution, and that's, again, extremely rare, 1 in 100. Otherwise, I would choose the generic brand first and probably discuss it with the patient that says, you know, I've chosen a generic brand to fill your prescription. It's going to cost you a lot less money. And again, in 99% of the cases, the patient's going to say, great, thank you very much.
All right. Sonia's on the line. Hi, Sonia. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Trying to figure this industry out. It's totally fascinating to me. What's your question tonight?
My question is, my doctor has recommended high blood pressure pill for me called Avapro. He said it was new, and he took me off Ramipril because of the dry cough. And I'm just wondering whether the pharmacist knows anything about this Avapro, because I asked my pharmacist to give me a printout on it, and there wasn't very much on it except that it's an angiotensin receptor blocker.
Good question.
That's right. There are earlier versions of angiotensin receptor blocker.
Is there?
That are less expensive, that you could ask your doctor
I see.
about, ask him to prescribe the you know, some of the original versions.
I see.
Does the same thing?
Yeah.
And much less.
The goal is, with any of the new medications, to have lower side effect profile. That means you're not going to have the cough. That means you're not going to have hypertension, where when you get up from a prone position and you jump out of bed, you feel faint. That's not going to happen with these newer versions of drugs versus the older kind of drugs.
Okay.
So there are particular advantages to you as a patient using it to control your hypertension.
Correct.
Have you tried the diuretics? You remember that? Or beta blockers, any of those ones?
Yeah, well, Ramipril, I think, was a beta blocker, wasn't it?
No.
I think Ramipril, no?
It's a different class.
Okay.
But that's just older drugs.
Diuretics I take on my own.
You already take diuretics,
Yes,
okay.
I do.
Well then, ask the physician to try an earlier version of that drug. It'll be definitely less expensive.
Very good. Thank you very much.
There you go, Sonny. We're helping you out, saving you money. Okay, Ruxana. Hi, Ruxana. How are you?
Hi, fine, thanks.
Good.
I think we need to change the questions. I think we really need to ask about the paradigm. Drugs are designed to suppress symptoms. They do not get to the root or cause of the malady. And how many people are suffering because of that? The fact that they're going after vitamins is simply because they can't be patented. And so there's a huge push, of course, by the pharmaceuticals to suppress anything natural. And I have to bring up something that I think is key and was not touched on in the program, because children have very little say in what they're given. And yet, who's behind the vaccine push? Pharmaceuticals that make billions and billions off of vaccines, which, contrary to myth, have no double-blind studies behind them. There's a huge revolving door between the manufacturers and the FDA and the CDC. And things like, for example, DPT is causing brain hemorrhaging, where parents are being blamed for shaken baby syndrome. We have huge and immense problems with the Hep B vaccine. It's endless. I mean, there have been deaths, and people are not hearing about this in part because of the enormous power and clout of the pharmaceuticals, and also the fact that they don't even take liability. And one thing people should consider when they read that so-called scientific insert, that those vaccines are studied for 4 days. Now, a child does not get autism, and you know about the recent autism lawsuit. They do not get autism necessarily in 4 days, and they certainly don't get multiple sclerosis or diabetes, which have been linked to the Hep B and other vaccines. So I think that has to be said. And if your guest could comment on the fact that we need to maybe change our paradigm and look at how we build our immune system. There are societies where there is no cancer, there is no diabetes. They've got clean air, they've got clean water. Look at the Hunza. So I think, these are people, these diseases are unknown. We're not a healthier society.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have the right pharmacist in the studio for you tonight, Ruxana, because Mark's Plaza Pharmacy, one of the reasons I wanted to have him on, is a fellow who believes in the natural products that are available for the healing process. And so thank you for your call. And that is something, I mean, she brought up a number of different points, so I'll let you respond to some of that. But that, you came on here saying, hey, I also have a large part of our pharmacy is dedicated to what she's talking about, right?
Well, that's absolutely. About 15 years ago, I came to the same conclusion Ruxana did, that there has to be a paradigm shift, because I spent years dispensing pills and medications and seeing no change in my patients. So, like, they weren't getting better. They still had to take this medication to control blood pressure or pain control, this type of thing, or their acid stomach.
We're just cloaking something.
Exactly. We typically have learned in Western medicine how to suppress something, and when you take a look at herbals, you take a look at homeopathy, which is big in Europe, and herbal, of course, is from China and India. They have a system of medication that has worked in their civilization, their society. Specifically, I looked at homeopathy as a way to help get the body better without suppressing the symptoms. It's basically your body goes out of balance, Everything's a teeter-totter. Women understand this in terms they have estrogen, progesterone cycles through their whole life until it stops. Well, the body's always built on this teeter-totter. And what we've learned in our medicine is that if the teeter-totter goes out of whack and your blood pressure goes up, well, we'll just put a 10-pound weight on here and bang, we fixed it temporarily until it goes out of kilter again, then you got to put a 20-pound weight on it. So I said, where is the solutions? Are there solutions that are natural that we can actually see some healing happen and you don't require these medications? And I found that in the herbs.
All right, we're going to come back. What about that? A pharmacist here who's into the natural medicines. And hey, we want to talk more about that. Want to talk to you, take your questions. You have a pharmacist here tonight. Let's talk.
This program is brought to you in part by The Pantry.
Real food, real value, real taste from The Pantry.
I'm Laura Lynn Tyler, and I'll be the host for some of your favorite movies and an insightful look at the moral of the story that gives you the big picture. Get the big picture every Tuesday and Saturday evening right here on Now TV.
The all-new Dodge Ram. With an available 245 horsepower